feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin. I hate you to speak.
You told me to be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, today we're reviewing A Quiet Place Day One. We're a few weeks late. I don't know how many decibels of noise you're going to get in the background from me, but I'm sitting outside and I'm doing audio only. So if I sound a little weird, no pun intended, it's because of that reason. So I've said this on multiple different shows, but unless you've listened to every single thing that we've done, you might not know, but I'm selling my condos. So bear with me while, I have some audio issues, or I sound crappier, or we're not on video. You can't see our beautiful faces. I'm chilling on my patio right now, having a salad and drinking a bubbly and listening to the sounds of Etobicoke, Ontario. No monsters running up these buildings. I can make as much noise as I want. And Eric will finally speak. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this just in terms of, how you feel about where this fits into the franchise, but also you got to see this in San Francisco. So I was curious to know about your experience, watching it at the Draft House.
Yeah. So, I think I'll go more into my SF trip, maybe on a main show. We'll bring back the main show because I do want to talk about that trip in general because it was awesome. But yeah, specifically, I went to go see A Quiet Place Day One at the Alamo Draft House New Mission in San Francisco. Gorgeous, gorgeous Alamo Draft House Theater. So Eric and I, we've been to the Brooklyn location, which is more so in a newer building, more of a multiplex vibe inside, like not a shopping mall complex, but it's like there's like a cool food kind of market downstairs, and then it's kind of in more of a modern building, where this one in San Francisco is like in an old restored cinema in the Mission area in San Francisco. So what they've done, they turned it into 5 cinemas, where the lower level, the main level of the theater, which has, I think it's like 300 to 500 seats, I forget what it is one big main theater, which was playing Kinds of Kindness when I was there, which I always think is interesting. Quiet Place was brand new and Kinds of Kindness was brand new, but they had Kinds of Kindness in the main theater, the 300-seat theater, and Quiet Place in one of the smaller ones, right? Where most places that would be swapped because Quiet Place is the quote-unquote bigger movie there. But Draft House considers a Yorgos 3-hour-long triptych to be a bigger pull in their style of theaters, which I think is interesting. Anyways, the upstairs, the balcony is turned into 4 smaller cinemas that are all restored. So what's great about this Draft House is that it has that gorgeous like architecture that you get in old cinemas. So like the ceilings are beautiful, the walls are really cool. It's in this old building where they have an arcade and a nice bar. So really, really cool vibe. Like, I love Alamo Draft House. I think they're not perfect, but, I think both you and I, Eric, aren't huge fans of eating like full meals during movies. Yeah, we'll smash a hot dog or some chicken fingers or something from a concession stand, but I don't need to like knife and fork it during a movie. I think that brings unnecessary sounds. It brings lots of different smells that you don't necessarily like want to have during a movie. And at Draft House, they serve you throughout the entire film.
It's disruptive.
Which is like, yes, I don't have to miss the movie if I want another beer or a soda or a refill on popcorn, but it is distracting. So for a cinema chain that prides itself on don't talk, don't text, no distractions kind of thing, like a really great projection, really great sound, proper masking, custom pre-shows, to have some of these other things that, yes, for casual moviegoers are kind of a pro, but for a cinema that focuses so much on its very like kind of niche hardcore film, I don't want to say film bro-y, but that kind of audience, um it feels like it's fighting with itself a little bit. So
There's
that's my
almost a hypocrisy within its
yeah,
own, system.
yes. So it's like a love-hate relationship where I love a lot of aspects about Draft House, but don't love some other things. Anyways, the experience at the theater is still great. I've only gone to Draft House with you and my wife, and they've been at weird times. So we've either gone like an early afternoon or like a morning show. So I've never been on like a Friday night where the theater's packed, where I could see that being very distracting with people ordering food and stuff like that. Where when we've gone, there's been like 10 people in the theater, so it's like not that bad. It's fine. And I don't mind the convenience of them bringing you stuff, but the experience of seeing A Quiet Place day one, so I know I haven't talked anything about the movie, and we will go into full spoilers on this because it's been out for a couple weeks now. So, but I still really wanted to talk about it because one, I love the movie. I really have liked all this trilogy, these three films. I like Michael Sarnoski and wanted to talk about him being, going from Pig and doing this film and things like that, which is why I wanted to do this with you and the experience at Draft House. So I will say projection, amazing. Sound was incredible. The audience was very respectful, which I think in all three Quiet Place films I've seen. I will say for big blockbusters, because of it has such intentional sound design where a lot of the film either has no score or is, quiet, that everyone in the theater is usually, at least in my screenings when I've seen those three films, have been very locked in and very respectful and haven't been talking and things like that. So I will say experience top notch, projection top notch, sound design, or the sound of the actual cinema incredible. So that's my little review of Alamo Drafthouse. New mission. I got my order because it was very early in the morning. I didn't do like a full breakfast, but I got a giant tub of the truffle popcorn. And then I had that with a cold brew and a water. So
And
I
you
had,
were shitting yourself later.
yeah. I did feel like crap afterwards. Not gonna lie. But then we got some sandwiches at a bodega and got some Greek salad and potatoes from this Greek restaurant called Suvla in SF. And we went to Dolores Park and had ourselves a little picnic, and it was wonderful after the movie. So, but now to the actual film. This is the first Quiet Place film to not be directed by John Krasinski. I've already mentioned it's directed by Michael Sarnoski. Sarnoski, right?
Sarnoski, yeah.
Yeah, who directed, ironically, we just recorded Longlegs, but the Nicolas Cage film Pig. So you have some new blood coming in as director. Krasinski still gets a story by credit and a executive or just a straight up producer credit on the film. So still very involved, but has passed off the directing reins to someone else.
Go make If.
Jesus Christ. And I will say it's probably the best thing for the franchise. Like, I really think that I'll just kick it off, Eric. Like, I was caught off guard by how much I enjoyed this movie. And that shouldn't have been too surprising for me because, like, I really did like A Quiet Place Part 1. I remember that really catching me off guard, and I really liked it. I compared it to Jurassic Park at moments, which is my favorite movie of all time. And I just really love again, we just talked about Longlegs, and I said movies that are very much my shit, where it kind of nails something that I really and I'm a sucker for kind of the post-apocalyptic either monster movies or dystopian landscapes and things like that. So the first Quiet Place really worked for me. A simple thriller. Just on a pure entertainment value, I thought it really worked. Some of the emotional beats are solid, but don't quite work as well. I think you could pick the movie apart and its universe apart a little bit, but I think there's no fun in that. So it didn't distract me as much. And I think overanalyzing it afterwards, I just took it for what it is. Second movie, I don't remember. I remember enjoying, but it was that weird pandemic time, right? When it came out straight to VOD, right? And I remember watching it at home and enjoying myself. I like the concept of a newborn baby in that universe and how you would have to keep them quiet, and that's a very difficult thing to do. But that's all I really remember about the second one. So going into this third one being a prequel, the origin of the aliens is something that you're like, okay, we'll maybe get more backstory on what happened and where they came from and what they are and blah 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 blah. So I think my like intrigue level is like, all right, prequel day one, like, okay, that sounds sort of interesting, but is that really? We've seen that 100 times with these types of movies. What I really loved about this is that it was very character focused, and I feel like the aliens and the monsters, yes, it's placed in the Quiet Place universe, but what I was so caught off guard by was Lupita Nyong'o and what's the kid from Stranger Things that's going to be
Joseph Quinn.
Joe Quinn, and just this relationship between these two strangers that come together during a traumatic time, and this platonic kind of love that develops throughout the movie between them. And, with Lupita's character having, being terminally ill, and how that would work in a world that is, looks like it's going to end, and things like that. And what is important in these times and in those moments. And I think it has a really great performance from the cat, who is Gizmo. Is that what the cat's name is?
Frodo.
No, Frodo. Sorry. Gizmo is someone else's cat that I actually know, I think, or a dog. Frodo the cat. I think it has some really great action sequences. Again, the sound, like in all three of the films, I think is really, really effective. But that relationship between those two characters, and I was really caught off guard by how much it made me feel and the heart in the movie, which I think is what Michael Sarnoski brings to it. And really, really solid direction. He's just a really good director, and nothing against Krasinski, but I think he's shown that, Quiet Place might have been sort of a flash in the pan kind of thing where great idea, great concept. He directed that movie totally fine, but bringing someone in who is a really, really solid director it can bring in really a lot of heart and good character moments, I think really elevated the movie a lot. And I was really caught off guard by how much I loved it. Sorry, I've been talking for like 10 minutes. So Eric, you go ahead.
Well, let's start with the most important thing is that, your experience at the Alamo Drafthouse in San Francisco was probably near perfect, but the New York trip was just slightly better because you saw Venom. And
Yes,
Venom was the superior movie of the two.
This is the first non-Spider-Man movie I've seen at Drafthouse. So, because there was Spider-Verse and Venom were the two other times, right? And then,
So okay, let's get into this. I think it's a very well-made movie in terms of how Michael Sarnoski is a great director. I am going to diss John Krasinski because I have seen John Krasinski's other films, The Haulers and Brief Interviews with Hideous Men.
And
for fuck's sakes. He's a terrible filmmaker, and it becomes even more apparent when you watch this movie because the character beats and the moments where the film gets away from the alien invasion aspect of it, as you were mentioning, I think is the strongest stuff in this story. And I think if you had someone like a Michael Sarnoski having developed this world, it would even be better. And so the limitations are the world that, Beck and Woods have developed with Krasinski. It's already established. So you have a director that's coming in and playing in a sandbox that somebody else has already, been in. The creatures would just come right now for the guy that's on the motorcycle or the car that's driving by. So
I'd be so dead. Probably,
there are some limitations for what you can do with the narrative, because I think one of my biggest problems with the movie, I don't like the creatures really at all. Like, I think that they're just kind of, they feel so generic in their design and look. And so with the success of, The Last of Us, and then also with Joseph Quinn being in this, you think about the Demogorgon, and so that's even more distracting. The only thing I kind of liked about them in this movie was when they first invade and they're climbing all over the walls and scurrying around, the buildings in New York City, is that they remind you of giant cockroaches. And it's almost like a New York kind of thing where it's like, you go to Devil's Kitchen and, you go into like a cheap apartment or hotel, and, you turn on the light and you hear the sound of the bugs like scattering. And like, that's kind of cool in terms of a visual. But when you're watching this, you realize, yeah, the strongest stuff are the character beats. And it's actually very similar to Pig in terms of how the story plays out. You have Lupita Nyong'o, who's playing this terminally ill patient that's, somewhat, a little bit ornery in terms of how she behaves. She considers herself to be mean, but I think there's a part of her that's using that as a defense mechanism
Yeah.
because her time is running out, but also I think she's just tired. The medication and the disease and just being completely drained and feeling as though like I just want it to be over. Like you can look at this narrative as well as being like it's not only a fight for survival in the level of like humans versus these creatures, but sort of being reawakened for a moment to have purpose again in your life, and that you're fighting for yourself as an individual. And I think like the idea of this character not trying to become you know, the hero or the savior of the world, but just wanting to do something that reminds her of being with her father as a child when he was playing, in a
Yeah.
jazz bar and then going for pizza. And the narrative is very simple in that way, where it's like Sam just literally wants to go for a slice of pizza in Harlem. And it's not about defeating the creatures. It's not about trying to find out what they are or what they want. It's these movies usually are all about that, even if they are a prequel and where they are. And like it was refreshing to see that the narrative wasn't trying to be a superhero movie basically. And with this relationship that she develops with Joseph Quinn, like Joseph Quinn's character has also been traumatized. And the first time we see him, which is actually much later in the narrative, he emerges from a flooded subway stop. And
Yeah.
so when you see this character, you realize that he's going through something that we haven't seen before, but he's able to express that in his, mannerisms and sort of his movements and how he behaves. And, it could be interpreted as almost like stalkerish at first,
Someone,
but I
yeah.
think because he's so traumatized, he's just looking for somebody or some sort of help. And so like obviously Frodo the cat being the thing that kind of connects the two in terms of the cat bringing him to her. And so the character Eric that Joseph Quinn plays, like he's dealing with his own issues because his family is from England, and he probably also feels very cut off from what's going on there. And he's studying law. So there are elements there that I think like all those aspects of the dynamic work. And there's a sense of like, okay, this does feel like a one-off movie in a lot of ways, because no matter what happens in this situation, Lupita
Yes. Yeah.
Nyong'o's character's condition isn't going to get better. And so kind of and that's also maybe a disappointment because she's so good in the movie. You kind of like we're like, oh, it's a bummer because
Oh, I agree, but like I think that
I actually
adds
think
to
she's
the
better than
movie
Emily
even,
Blunt.
right? Like,
I'm going to be
yeah.
honest. Definitely, definitely. But you are really disappointed. It's like, oh, it's a one-off kind of thing for her because she is just so good in the film. Um, but then, yeah, I think like the creature, some of the plot holes that are there, um, like it's fun to enjoy it in the moment. Like I think one of the biggest problems I have with these movies, and
I
even
agree.
the third one, which is the best of the three in my opinion, is the score. I think like if this movie really wanted to go full out and be like completely experimental and
Yeah,
balls to
you
the
said that in the
wall,
first film
I
as
think it
well, I
would find a
remember.
way
Yeah.
to not have any score. And
Right. You're
yeah, yeah,
adding
and I
sound
think
to
because
add
the score
emotion,
defeats the
right?
purpose of
Where
what this narrative is. Yeah, and instead of like actually, because like the audience, as you mentioned before, is engaged with it. They're quiet. They're sitting there. They're interested in what's happening. Like, it almost feels like a studio thing where it's like, well, we need
Or
to
tell
make
them
sure
when
we
they're
have
supposed
some
to feel
music or
things,
some
right? Yeah.
sound to keep people invested because yeah, because we're afraid that we'll lose them. And it's the same thing with a certain jump scare that's in this movie that feels like a
Is
studio
it the
note
dream sequence?
than
We're
like
in
something that's
spoiler territory,
organic
right?
within the narrative
Yeah.
being told. Yeah, yeah. So when she kind of
Yeah,
wakes
it's
up
very cheap,
from
but like
a
it's
nightmare
kind
and
of
then she looks
funny,
out
but
the
like
window, that and it feels like the studio's like, "Oh, we did a test screening of this and we need more scares." And then with like the creatures again, like I love the image of Quinn going for the medicine that Lupita
in the
Nyong'o's
nest or
character
whatever,
needs,
or
but
yeah.
like it being kind of almost like yeah, but the nest, it feels like
Yeah,
even
because
the
they are
are
eating
they
them in that
eggs or are they
moment,
food?
right?
It's
Like, are
it's
they eating
it's
them?
such a
So like,
weird thing in terms
I,
of like the design
I,
of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of with
It
you, like,
almost
but
looks like,
I'm
cabbage or
a, it's
something
a,
like that, like
I'm
lettuce.
of two minds of it. Where part of me likes that the movie doesn't really go into more detail of like what they are, where they came from, or why they're here for the most part, or anything like that. And I forget if the second one really does. Um, And then I even like moments like that. Like I like that the focus was on them and that this was more just set dressing. Um, because yeah,
I don't mind not knowing anything about them, I should be very specific about that. It's more so
sure.
what they're doing or how they interact with humans or how they're attacking, like, you should be able to understand the mechanics of these creatures just through
Yes. And I feel like,
their how they behave. I still don't
yeah.
think I like, other than they can't they use
And
sound to
there's many
hunt.
plot holes
Other
we've
than
gotten
that,
in
I
all
don't
three
feel
of
like
the
I know
films that
really
kind of
anything about
contradict
these
that, right?
creatures.
Of like, even someone brought up in this one being like all the noise they make in that opening segment of car alarms going off or smashing into buildings. Wouldn't they just be totally scatterbrained and not be able to find anyone because there's so much noise going on? How would you be able to
It'd
pinpoint
be so
a human
overwhelming.
making noise rather than something else making noise, right? Like, so there are,
Which would be funny though, in a
because
way,
it's
where
so
it's almost
noisy.
like the
Yeah.
aliens meet their match in New York, where like the sound is so strong, where people are still just going, and that's the kind of thing where I kind of almost wish like there was a comedic beat where like the creatures are coming in and they're supposed to terrorize things, but like
Yeah.
the joke is that New
Yeah.
Yorkers
No.
are so desensitized where they're still going on with their
And I think
day.
with all
Like
three,
that would
like
be
I
funny,
think those
but
are
it's
all
not that
valid
kind of movie,
criticisms. I
obviously.
think it just depends on if you can shut off your brain a little bit when it comes to, and I'm not saying people can't overanalyze a movie or nitpick or go into those plot points because that will stand out for some people and ruin the experience because you have to set rules in your world and stick to them, or else people will go, well, what are the rules of this world? Or it will take you out of the movie, the immersion of it, right? So I definitely get that. I just think a lot of those things I don't notice while watching the movie. I notice them when someone else either points them out or I think about it after I finished and enjoyed the movie. And I'm not trying to make excuses for the movie or say that that's like an okay thing, but I'm trusting my brain and my gut when I'm watching it. And it doesn't bother me when I'm watching it because I'm watching it for entertainment. Yeah, I'm in the moment and I'm watching it for
Well,
entertainment.
you're in the
Or I
moment,
think the
right?
emotional beats are
Yeah.
so strong where those beats worked for me so well that I'm not thinking about that other stuff. So I think overall it works because I really, that relationship between, the two characters and the cat and like the the little bit of backstory you get from their lives and just how they come together, like I found myself choking up or tearing up like three or four separate times in this movie. And I'm a guy who gets emotional pretty easy in movies. Like I don't bawl my eyes out in every movie. I am a little bit cynical at times, but like lately and even more so, like I will let myself feel emotion. And I think when it's done well, um, it will get me. And this movie got me multiple times. And then I have to trust myself and go, well, it's working because um moments between them two, or moments between, I grew up with cats, so a lot of that stuff worked really well on me, right? Like I've had many, many cats in my life, whether it's my parents or my sister's wonderful cat and things like that. So a lot of stuff with Frodo. Um, the best Frodo on screen. I'm just gonna call it now. So, um, so I just think emotionally it really worked. The heart that Michael Sarnoski puts in is great. I think the action sequences are exciting and really work and are tense and spread out well. I don't disagree with you on the music point. I just don't even think about the music that much. It's another thing that I barely notice. I Yeah. And
It's more so like an
yeah,
after conversation where, like, in the moment you're enjoying it. Like, I agree with you. Like, I like these movies in the moment, and I even like the first
sure.
film,
When you think
but
about
it's
it,
more
and
so like
yeah,
when, like, that's where you start to sort of pick it apart. It's like, oh yeah, like, why, like, this doesn't make sense, or this like, it's one thing to nitpick
oh, if things
certain
stand out,
things,
if they just
but then it's
naturally stand
another
out and
where
you
it's like
start
you start
thinking
to
about them, I
find the
don't think that's
holes
necessarily
within it.
nitpicking. You're not going there trying to find something. It just pops up in your head, and I think that's totally fine. And I even like what the movie does with, like, you know, elaborating a little bit on how the sound of water and waterfalls lets you kind of hide your sound. Yeah, hide your voice. There's a great moment with some young
Don't go
kids
chasing
that they come across
waterfalls.
that I think further tries to, bring up moments in that first film and how, um, but then that's also brings, well, why wouldn't you just go live by a waterfall? Blah, 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 blah. That's all stuff we talked about in the first film. So I definitely understand that. And its use of sound, I think the movie goes, it, I agree with you that it would have been interesting to have no score, but I think it does such a good job in those moments where it doesn't have a score, that's what does stand out to me more so than the music kicking in, right? Like those moments that it is very quiet, there's very little dialogue, or the sound design really has to be the main driver of the film, and just visual performances from without any speaking. Um, I think are so effective that I it doesn't bother me when the music kicks in or even thinking about it afterwards. But yeah, I think it's a very simple movie. Like I think it's predictable. I don't think it's groundbreaking in any way. I think it's a very straightforward movie that just has, that just has really great characters and really great
It's
character
stripped down.
moments and really great relationships, and is just very, very effective in its storytelling and its simplicity. And I think that's why I really liked it. Like, I could have told you probably from frame one what was going to happen with the Lupita Nyong'o character, right? And their relationship with Joseph Quinn. And like, it's not a movie that's like, yeah,
Well, once you see her at the hospice, you get the idea that,
is not making it
okay, this
through.
is a character, no matter what's going to happen to her in this journey, she's not going to make it through. And I mean, that's also, it, she doesn't have the obligation where she'll get tied to like multiple sequels or things like that.
It's
So,
very freeing.
like you get
Yeah,
the feeling, and maybe that's even more powerful in a sense of, like, if you really like this
totally.
character, you feel even more of an emotional connection. Because I wasn't like it, like, I didn't have that emotional rawness to it, but I really appreciated
Yeah.
it. I think I was more emotionally raw with Pig, where I felt, like Nicolas Cage in that movie, like, just breaks you down to the point where you feel like, you understand everything that he's going through and why he's doing what he's doing. Where, like, I think this is bringing more humanity to, a typical blockbuster that finds these little pockets to really kind of create some additional texture and, humanity within these characters and in this world. And I think if you, didn't have someone like Michael Sarnoski directing it, you would lose it. Because, like, obviously, the other thing is, Jeff Nichols was going to direct this, and he did cite creative differences, and I understand why. Because, like, I can see, like, obviously, like, Michael Sarnoski's not Jeff Nichols, but they do have this similar sensibility of, like, grounding things in a real world and trying to be truthful to the characters and the environments that they're in. And that is something where like I can understand maybe, you know, Nichols not wanting to do
Yeah,
this
he
because he
might have
didn't
even
want
stripped it down
to
even
deal with
more,
all of
right?
the
And had
creature
barely
effects
any like
and, you know,
like
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
This isn't even a Quiet Place movie anymore. It's just quiet. And so, you know, like you understand why like someone like that might, you know, want to have complete, you know, authority or ownership over it. Where you know, Sarnoski, that I was worried about this as well because, you know, he's an up and coming filmmaker. You know, he has this
And
one kind
swallows
of
him up,
breakout
yeah.
film, and it's like, you know, the studio system comes calling, and it's like, do you lose your voice? And to the point where like you hear that he's doing this Robin Hood movie next that A24 picked up with Jodie Comer and Hugh Jackman, and you think to yourself like, oh, you know, this maybe a Quiet Place Day One isn't going to be very good because he's already kind of like moved on. But luckily, like I think he is the driving force
Oh,
behind this
right,
with two
yeah.
really great performances, and I also think Alex Wolff, who was in Pig as well, you know, as the nurse, like, you know, he takes the loss early on, and in the trailer, it's very deceiving in terms of you think it's going to be somebody else based
He's
on the
great,
trailer,
yeah.
but he's very likable in a very kind of natural way where, you know, like he's able to take a lot of the cruelty or the meanness that Lupita Nyong'o's character is dishing out, and you know, you watch him and you think to yourself, you know, this is a guy, like the way he looks and the way he presents himself, he could be smarmy or ashholeless, but he's very gentle and kind and patient and
Sure,
um
yeah.
you know, like it's a very different role from what he did in Pig, where
Yeah.
like in Pig he's such a tool in that movie, and you know, later on in that movie he does come to find a compassion and understanding for Cage, and you like him then. But here, like you're watching and it's like, oh, like this is really kind of like subtle
Yeah.
quiet work. So when he takes that loss and he gets literally wiped off the
No,
face of
totally.
the earth, you
And even
you
right,
do feel
I
it, like you
agree.
do
I
feel
think
like,
that
oh, like
moment really works.
that kind
I
of
even like
sucks, you know, that
the
he's gone.
moment right at the beginning with the marionette show of just like her going in thinking it would be super lame and that like why are we here like doing this, and then you see it and it's this very heartfelt kind of like beautiful kind of performance by this puppeteer, and I think that that kind of sets the tone for even kind of you're not going to get what you expect in, you know, yes, it's a popcorn blockbuster, but there's a little bit more to it. And I think it's like, don't underestimate, you know, certain things. And I kind of like that that carries throughout the movie. Again, very simple, just very well executed. I think, yeah, I agree with you that I think it's the best of the three films. And I really like that first film quite a bit. And I was just, I really, really, really liked this. So yeah, um, yeah,
It's a better movie than it has any right being, I think, especially
I
for a
know, right?
third film
Yeah,
in a franchise that's produced by Michael Bay's company. That like all these things, like it works because I think like you have a really good director, you have solid cast members. Um, you know, it's nicely shot.
yeah.
Like, I mean,
So
we didn't even
I
talk about
totally
like the
forgot about
connective
that.
tissue
It's
with
probably
Djimon Hounsou and like that. I think is also a little bit disposable. But there's something where it's like I was hoping for more in terms of like giving him character because he kills a guy who's freaking out, and it actually weirdly reminded me of
yeah.
when Tom Cruise kills Tim Robbins in War of the
Why
Worlds,
someone
where
does
it's like
it,
you're
right?
doing
Yeah.
something horrible, but you can understand why he's doing it, and also what effect it'll have on that person because they still realize, oh, I murdered somebody. And so like I was hoping for more with
So
that, but it just kind of it has the moment and then they just go on to the point even with Alex Wolff getting killed, where when it happens, you know, it's
I agree.
horrible, but then
Yeah.
like the next scene, it's just like, you know, Lupita Nyong'o's like walking around and
Those
like,
are those
you
little
know,
plot
it feels like,
things that
oh,
you
it was
can
just
kind of
like
start
it's
picking
almost
apart of being like,
episodic
wouldn't they
weirdly
be? I know
where
a lot of horrible shit just happened that, and this is just a nurse that was like, but it's still someone you who was caring for you that just got absolutely fucking murked by this giant freak monsters, or even the just trauma
And
of
all
this
these other
thing
sick
happening,
patients that
right?
are
Like,
still in
it's like everyone would be
the marionette
freaking the
show.
fuck out, where moments later everyone's kind of settled down and knows to be quiet. Is like, and that one moment where that guy is freaking out and Jaimin Hansu has to kill him. But so remind me, this is how cloudy my memory is with certain movies. Jaimin Hansu's in the second movie, right? And what I forget what he even does in the
Yes,
second
yeah.
movie. Yeah. Yes, like that
He's on
has
the
the
island. He's kind of like one of the people that are like helping with the island, and him and Killian Murphy are like at the like yeah like the broadcast. Like he kind of I can't remember like his actual function, but like he's kind of one of
so
the
you could even
people
expect that
on
Joseph
this
Quinn's
island
character
that kind of
might
are
be on that
caretakers, I
island,
guess
right?
now.
If you're like thinking in your head, like that's that group of people on the boat at the end of this
Yeah.
movie probably start that, commune or whatever the fuck you want to call it, on that island. Okay, because like I'm watching it and I'm like, oh shit! Like when Jaimin, I missed most of the trailer. I don't know if they give away the Lupita Nyong'o terminally ill stuff in the trailer or anything. Okay, because like I was caught off guard by that,
They don't.
and then Jaimin Hansu, I know that they showed in the trailer, but I totally forgot. Yeah,
But he's at the end of the trailer, and it makes you think that that's going to be at the end of the movie. And I already mentioned that when
yes,
Alex Wolff
yeah,
gets
yeah,
killed in the trailer, it's the puppeteer
which is
that
great.
turns off that engine. So there's some misleading stuff in terms, and this is why marketing sometimes you shouldn't
Yeah,
necessarily pay full
which is why
attention to in
Harrison
terms of
Ford had no
thinking
idea
that's
he
what
was
you're
Red
getting,
Wolf, right?
which I think is it's good in terms of a misdirection.
So uh I
Yeah,
just
what's a Red
forgot.
Hulk?
Right when he popped up, I was like, "Oh shit, Jaimin Hansu." He was in the second one, and I'm like, I'm like, but I was like, I don't remember him really
It's
that. Like the
DH.
second one is very cloudy in my brain. I've rewatched that first one a couple times, but um, yeah,
The second one is just the definition of a sequel, though. Like, it just kind of feels like, oh, it did. Like, obviously, the pandemic was there, and it maybe kind of took its wind out of its sails a little bit. But there's the aspect of like, oh yeah, Killian Murphy is just replacing John Krasinski now, and you have these characters that are trying to, go from land to sea and see if they're they can make it, and the communication with anybody outside of the area that they're in. It's one of those movies where it's like it is a high concept horror film where I think the more world
yeah,
building you also do in these narratives, the more it could hurt the film, just because it's like the Terminator movies where you have an idea and you are maybe able to take it in one direction and put it in another, but if you keep making these sequels, they don't necessarily always build a
no.
mythology,
The
or a
more you
mythology
know,
of
it's
these
yeah, I
these
agree.
worlds
Like it
aren't
almost
there.
hurts the
Maybe it's
other
a little
movies
too
more than it
thin.
helps it because you're adding lore that isn't necessarily the lore either what
Yeah.
people wanted or thought, or you kind of contradict yourself or retcon things. I mean, with Terminator, with time travel stuff, it's very tricky. Um, and then with yeah, the more you know about certain creatures and things like that, we talked about this in our long legs review too. Of like, the more you see of something and the more you reveal it, the less scary it is or the less interesting it is, right? And I mean, I think Long Legs does a much better job. And if we're on Long Legs 5, if they start going, the literal devil
Your
is popping up
imagination is
and like
scarier than
and
what
like
you're
they've
seeing.
developed like some sort of lore of how it's possessing. I don't want to spoil too much in that movie, but like um then maybe we go, okay, maybe that's enough lore for Long Legs. But um
Or hear me out, when we get to A Quiet Place 7, and it's kind of been a soft reboot legacy sequel, and John Krasinski is basically
yes.
turned into James Cameron, where
Yeah, yeah.
he'll have a video and say this is the best Quiet Place since the
Dump truck
first
of
one,
cash,
and
yeah.
then it's
That
like
sound you
5
hear in the
minutes later you
background
see
is,
a dump truck of money come to his
if you can hear
house.
that light
where
hum in the
where do you want me
background,
to put it,
that is
Mr.
the dump
Krasinski?
truck of cash that Paramount has just driven up to my house to give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. So I really liked it. I was really caught off guard with how much I loved it. I think it's one of my I've been very generous lately on my movie ratings, but I think I've just been really enjoying a lot of the stuff that I see, which is a good thing. So I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's not that I didn't like the movie, and I think there's a lot of great stuff. I mean, I mentioned, I think Michael Sarnoski is a really good director. I think the performances are great. I think it's just that within the, you know, factory assembly aspect of what's already been created, you can only do so much. But I think what is being done is better than what I was expecting it to be. The only thing as well that I wish that um, they would have done with this if it
Yeah,
was a Jeff Nichols movie is
good
that
for
Michael
you.
Shannon could have played the cat and it would have been 5 stars. And also, I mean, with the name Frodo, we didn't mention that there are allusions to Lord of the Rings throughout. Like even that
See,
nest
where I
is
wouldn't
kind of
have
almost
gotten any
like
of that. So
Mordor in a
thankfully
way.
you're here to tell people those things. That's dork. All right. Thank you all for
'Cause I'm a
listening.
fucking
We
nerd.
really do appreciate it. Please go check out our letterbox, which is Untitled_movies. We'll have all of our ratings and reviews over there for you, as well as some rankings and other things. What else? What else? You should, God, more noise now. So good thing we're wrapping up. You can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. And please go check out our other reviews that we have up right now, like Long Legs and Kinds of Kindness, both mentioned in this episode. And Eric has a review right now with Balthazar Commissar, Kermacor. Sorry. But every time I hear Balthazar, I think
Kermacor.
of Jingle. Is it Jingle All the
That's okay.
Way? Or Phil Hartman just saying Balthazar. Anyways, uh, so that's what I think of when I hear that guy's name. Go check out that interview. Eric does a wonderful 20-minute, it's almost like a full podcast episode. So that's you guys should go check that out. And he'll have interviews up with Viggo Mortensen soon, as well as others. So there's tons of stuff coming your way. And we're just getting started in summer movie season because we'll have reviews for Twisters and Deadpool and Wolverine in the next couple weeks. So um, it's a good time, and I have more free time now. So we should be podcasting more, but we'll see. Don't hold us to that. Yeah.
I like cautiously optimistic. I appreciate that. I'm Eric March, and you can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene
And I promise I
and
do want
on
to
all
talk
the
about my
social
San
medias
Francisco
at
trip, so we probably will
EM6211.
do a full episode on that because shout out to Tim Geddes,
We
one of the
should,
most
yeah.
ridiculous but amazing human beings I've ever known. His wedding was absurd in the best ways and loving and very sweet in the best ways too. Um, but unlike any wedding I've ever been to in my life, and unlike any wedding I will probably ever go to um, in my life. So I will talk about that more on a future episode. But thank you all again. And until next time,
It would have been amazing
it
if
had some
the
sort of
pizza place they
shitty
went to was
tie-in
just a
that Michael
Domino's.
Bay set up that was just Bud Light and a Pizza Hut or something. That would,
Well, that would have been a big thing, and
sure.
like if this was
That
like a
pizza place
'90s
would have been
tie-in, like if
something.
it was a
That would have
'90s
been incredible.
blockbuster
Yeah,
film,
like
it would have been that.
Little Caesars. You
Yeah,
got the
like
fucking.
Pizza or
Anyways, bye
something
everybody.
like Caesars.
Bye everybody.
Quiet Place combo.